Thank you for coming tonight. I appreciate you guys stepping outside of your athletics and your extracurriculars, as well as Mr. Goling for coming and supporting this event. I think I'm a great college counselor, but sometimes counselors need mentors, and this is my mentor. Mr. Davis has been working in college education. I can't even give a number probably because you were ahead of me, and if I've been doing it for 13, I'm gonna give you 20. I don't know. Um, Go Bears all day, alumni of UC Berkeley, but followed in his footsteps through the DCAC program at UC Berkeley and then on to college access. Yancey's been in the game for a minute, but I want him to kind of give his background and understand that he is a resource outside of this. And if you're interested in connecting with him, please do reach out to me first, and then I will connect you. But I am going to hand it over and say thank you so much, Mr. Davis, for coming out.
No problem at all. Thank you, Liz. So good evening, everyone. My name is Yancie Davis. I have been doing this type of work. I think I really started this work back, honestly, in college when I was at UC Berkeley, when I was actually helping going up and down the state, helping students kind of like understand what does it mean to fill out a college application and what does it mean to apply to Berkeley and the benefits of college and all that stuff. So honestly, it has been about 20 years or so that I've been doing this. I would say from a professional, like people have been giving me money to do this. It's been about 16, 17 years. And so I have kind of like been, had a chance to kind of like do this work in a variety of different ways. I've worked for nonprofit organizations, running college access programs. I've had a chance to work in the colleges where I worked at Stanford University, where I was an assistant director of admissions, particularly working on kind of multicultural recruitment and marketing as well. And then I went from there to McAllister College, where I had a chance to oversee their multicultural recruitment. So that was, kind of being part of school leadership and really being able to help really kind of like help the school understand what does it mean to bring students from different parts of the country, different parts of the world to come and how to help them thrive on that campus. So I was at McAllister for a couple of years. And then I decided that, as I was moving up in the ranks in college admissions, that I really wanted to be able to have the opportunity to be able to, still work with families and work with students directly in that way, as opposed to, when you get into the higher ranks of college admissions, it's less about helping people directly and it's more about policy, which again, policy is great if you have the power to make it, but also putting out adults fires and things like that, particularly like staff and things like that. And that wasn't really kind of like my vibe. Working with families and being able to answer questions is what I love to do in that way. So left the college side, came over to the school side where I've been now working in schools. This is going into year um what is this? This is year seven, where I spent 5 of those years as a college counselor, and I'm now in my second year as a director of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging at Bentley School, which is over on the other side of the I guess the tunnel from you all. And so going into year two with that, but I still get a chance to kind of like help students and any opportunity that I have to kind of like, if it's whether help a school, help a family, help a student kind of like better understand the college process. If it works within my schedule, I'm more than happy to jump at the opportunity to be able to do that. So really excited to be here with you all today. Looking forward to, again, what questions I can answer for you in that way, particularly as I'm understanding, talking a little bit more about essays, kind of getting ready for that, but also more than happy to like I said, touch upon any part of the application process. So I think, I have a couple of ways that we can go about doing this. I kind of have a presentation ready to kind of like talk about the college application and particularly about essays, because I think that that is a piece that when it comes to the application process, it's really the thing that where you as a student have the most control over your narrative and what you want to share, and what you want to make sure is included in your application in that way. So have something ready to talk about that. But understanding if you all have questions, I can kind of like jump from there. I do want to make sure that this is useful for y'all. So I'll kind of like take a quick poll and you can feel free to kind of like answer in the chat. Do y'all want to jump into questions right away? Or I can kind of move through the presentations and we can save questions for the end. How do y'all want to approach it?
Can we do the presentation first?
Sure. Absolutely. So I can do that. So I will go ahead and I'll share my screen now. So let's see, share. Great. Awesome. Okay. So like I said, I have my presentation ready and I'll move through it as briskly as I can. Because again, I'm also going to work with a little bit of the assumption that has taught y'all some of this before. So I don't want to necessarily kind of like, beat the dead horse or anything like that. But in this, kind of like talking about the college essay, touch a little bit upon personal essays. It was mostly about the personal essays, but kind of touch a little bit about supplemental essays and also a little bit about the UCPIQs as well. So I made sure to put a piece about that in there also. So to kind of go over the agenda really quick, we talk about what the personal essay is, the role of personal essays in today's admissions process. So it gives us a chance to talk a little bit about some trends and things like that. And then where do I start? I'm really hoping that y'all have already started in that way. But again, I think that some of the things I can talk through within there does kind of get to the piece around kind of like, again, am I going in the right direction? Making sure that kind of like I haven't skipped any parts of the steps going from there, getting ready to write, talk about some do's and don'ts, and finally in with some words of the wise. So some last tips to kind of like take with you as you kind of go out the door. So what is the personal essay? So I think that when it comes to the essays, it's always important to remember that this process is rooted in holistic review. And that is a fancy way of saying that no matter, again, what grades you bring to the table, no matter what test scores you have to the table, no matter what you decide to write on your essay, and whatever you do on your extracurricular activities, all of these things come into play, right? It's all different pieces of the puzzle, and the puzzle is going to look different from student to student in that way. So it's just important to know that when colleges are looking at this, they're not going and just looking at your test scores saying, yep, you did it, you're good, we're getting you in from that way. It all comes together. And again, the equation is different for each student. That's what probably makes it so maddening of like, hi, how do you do it? Like, what's the answer? What am I supposed to do? Because it can honestly look different from student to student. That is kind of what holistic review is giving every student that real chance to shine in their own context and in their own way. So again, when it comes to specifically the personal essay, that is part of the common application. So again, the idea that you're writing, again, this one essay that multiple schools will get a chance to see in that way. I mentioned before, we'll talk a little bit more about some supplemental essays later. But really, this boils down to, again, as I mentioned before, having your opportunity to share information in your own words with the colleges that you are interested in. So again, you do have some choice in this process, and this is where you get to make some choice, both in the schools that you're choosing to send it to and what you choose to write about as well. At the end of the day, what admissions committees are looking for is this opportunity to kind of like look more into who you are, your personality, your interests, your experiences. It's always important to underscore that even in this age of AI, this is still going to be a human process. Humans are pushing the buttons, they are reading applications, they are taking these summaries with them into kind of like admissions decisions in that way. So just knowing that now again, the age of computer is not all the way there yet. Humans are a part of this process, and these humans are trying to understand who you are and how do you fit the schools that they work for. So to talk a little bit about the role of essays in today's kind of like admissions landscape, I think, again, we are in this process where probably over the last 5 or 6 years, kind of like post-pandemic, this administration, so on and so forth, we are seeing some pretty drastic shifts in the sense of how quickly some things are moving in that way. And so particularly when it comes to the Department of Education and the policies that they're kind of like approaching in today's age is really about understanding that as these things are shifting, again, how our schools, how our colleges kind of like able to adapt, how are they able to adjust to these new policies, right? So while they can feel like it's a little bit more of a moving target, what is not changing is that many students are still applying and they're applying to more schools. So again, no matter how the colleges are moving or are getting caught flat-footed or don't know what to move next, they still have a business to run. They are still doing admissions year after year. They still need to bring students in to fill seats, to fill beds, to fill their campus in that way, so they can meet their missions. And so to that end, understanding that the application process still exists, it still moves forward. And not only that, again, the idea that more s- more students are applying to more and more colleges per student than ever before because of the wider adoption of the Common Application, because of the Coalition application, because of the Black Common Application, like again, all these opportunities where students can apply to multiple schools using one platform. It means that it's making it easier for students to apply to college, and because it's easier, they're applying to more schools. So, in addition to that, as I mentioned before, we are in this age of AI, and to that end, how is that impacting the admissions landscape? So again, it's funny enough that like on one end, there are people that are worried that because everybody is adapting AI and using Chat GPT or Google Gemini or um, whatever version of AI or generative AI that people are using. The idea is that colleges are equally interested in the ways that they could use AI in order to help make their job easier. Like I mentioned before, more applications are coming in because students are applying to more and more colleges. So as a result of that, it really ends up being that, that it's more applications to read, and it's not a industry where people are flocking to do this work, because most people that work in admissions do not choose to go into admissions. They kind of fall into admissions in that way. So to that end, with more and more work to do, more and more applications, but also connected to these shifts where, again, if we can't necessarily look at race in an admission process, or again, we don't know where the background, where these students are coming from and things like that. How can we better summarize or better kind of like find some of those things that our school, our individual school is looking for in that way? So again, still human. AI, does it help make the process easier? Does it allow them to pinpoint and find things a little bit better in that way? It all still is undergirded by the idea that authenticity is still the most important thing that, again, the admission officers are looking for in a process. As much as they might want to lean on AI, they are leaning on AI to help understand you better, to help understand the student that is applying. So if AI can help them better understand what you're trying to say in your application, then in their minds, it's like, great, we get a chance to know you better. What that means for you, the student, the applicant, is that it is more and more important in this space where it's so easy to try to ask, put in a prompt and say, write this essay for me. Um, it's easy to do that. But again, easy in this process is not always on the same line. I think the most important thing is about the idea of how do I make sure that at the end of the day, this school understands who I am and what I can bring to that school. That's where that authenticity comes into play. So again, authenticity is still a really important thing that they're going to pitch for. They're going to talk about it at conferences and all that stuff. But what does authenticity look like, or how does that bust through the screen with kind of like AI being on both sides of the table, so to speak? So I think at the end of the day, what it ends up being is that so many different things can change. Schools are trying to, meet their budgets. How do they get students in the door and keep them there? How are they making sure that they have, students' attentions and families' attentions? And even with the shift in kind of like financial aid, and is FAFSA going to work the same and all of that stuff, that things change, but things are still going to be the same. Students are still going to apply to college. College still plays a major role in helping kind of like set people up for the future, and colleges are preparing students for their jobs of the future in that way. So, to that end, it's important to understand that if that is your goal of going to college to make a better future for myself, then it's really important to understand what schools best set me up for that. And to that end, how do your personal values and your experiences fit with the colleges that you're looking at, their values and their opportunities as well? So making that match is still extremely important. And so to that end, being able to sit in this process is really important. And the essays are one of the most prime and opportune ways for you to make that match for the college, to let them know that this is who I am, this is what I believe in, this is what this is my value system, and this is how it matches with your mission and what you do with your students and what you produce and go out into the world once you give them their diplomas and their degrees and things like that. Your essays are really important with that. So that's why this essay part of the process, no matter how much, again, we focus on grades and things like that, it's still going to be a pretty key part of the process. So, Moving on. So where do we start? Where do we go from here? As you know, you have your Common App personal essay, where you have different prompts that you can respond to, and it's 650 words that you get to kind of like write, which is about a page and a half to kind of like tell the story that you want to tell. You then have some colleges that utilize supplemental applications or essays. So these might be smaller essays that you use, which can have various word limits. It can be as small as 25 or 50 words. It can be as much as another 650 word essay. It just depends on the college. And it can be multiple of these different types of supplemental essays that are part of the applications, which are utilized again within the Common App. Some of them have very specific topics, while some of them might be a little bit more open-ended. So if you are the type of person who's like, you tell me what to do and I can do it, there are some parts of this process where you're going to be challenged a little bit. You're going to have to find a way to be a little bit creative. You're going to have to be able to tell the story without them kind of like giving you the answer in advance. So it's something you might have to be able to wrap your mind around and be ready for. So as you can see, these are the prompts that you have for the Common App. I'm not going to go through these and read all of them because again, you have access to these. You'll have them in this presentation that I'll make available afterwards, but also you can Google Common App prompts and find it right away. And the funny thing is that these prompts have not changed, honestly, in the last about almost 10 years in that end. And so again, not anticipating that it's going to go and change in anywhere else. So again, like this is what has been on the table for a while. I kind of put this up for two things is that one, your idea is that you kind of want to choose which one allows you to write the essay or tell the story that you want to be able to tell, that shares the things that you feel like are most important about you to share. So you choose one. And I also pointed out for another reason because they kind of do tell you again what are the things you want to write about, even if it's the one where it's kind of like your choice. So again, as you look at all these, I kind of like point out this idea that again they're asking you to talk about your background, your identity, things that you're interested in, any talents that you have, any lessons that you have learned, any challenges that you have faced, your beliefs or different ideas that you have. And again, I was like, how do you talk about gratitude, things that you've accomplished? Or just different kind of like concepts that you really care about. So it's like those are the things, those are the kind of like the what do I say, the objective things that these different prompts are looking for. But there's a subjective part to this as well, is that you get the opportunity to tell stories. You get a chance to kind of like show how you have learned the process of going from one place to another. You see reflect is on a few of these prompts in that way. So this idea of needing to sit down and actually think about your own experience, it really requires you to take some time to be able to reflect and do that. Speaking about your growth. So again, that idea of going from one place to another. I was at one spot at one point, and now I am here. So being able to lay out that process in your essays, in your application, and the ways that you engage, that engaging part being really important because again, what colleges are asking you to do, they don't want you to be the type of student that goes there and I only kind of like sit in class and take a test and then I leave and I'm never on campus. They want students who are going to add to the life of campus. They want students that are going to come and be leaders. They want students who are going to be able to graduate and be able to say, I took advantage of the opportunities that this school or this college made available to me. And so then now I'm a successful alumni. I can point back to the experiences and opportunities that that college gave me. They want to be able to see that you're the type of student that was going to take advantage of the opportunities that the school offers. So to that end, again, just understanding that, you have a choice in the different stories that you might want to tell, which pieces of your identity, which part of your of the challenges you face, the different accomplishments that you have had, and I'm sure for all of you all, amazing students, that there's accomplishments all over the place, right? You get to choose, and in many cases, you have to choose which ones you want to talk about, right? Because again, the Common App essay is not it's not a cover letter. This is not going with a resume or anything like that. It's really about kind of like opening the doors to kind of like understand what are those things inside of your mind, inside your soul, inside your kind of like this experience that makes you tick. They want to be able to understand that. So hopefully that part was helpful there. So to touch upon a few personal essay tips. Again, It's about choosing the prompt or the topic that appeals to you, one, but also lets you to tell your authentic story. Again, there goes that word again, authentic. You want to make sure that again, what you're being able to tell is something that like again, you like I am ready, like I'm actually excited to share about this part of me in that way, and you're able to tell again your part of it. And again, when it comes to authentic, it's important to remember that authentic in this process is way more important than unique. You'll see me talk about that again. Authentic is way more important than unique because again, it's not about being able to say that I'm the one person in the world that did this thing. That again, you can still be authentic, and again, your perspective of your story can do that. That's why you see twins who one can kind of like you can have twins that can get into the same school, but you can also have twins and one twin gets in and the other twin doesn't get in. Most of that they've experienced together, but again, it's about that authenticity and the ability to be able to kind of like tell your story in the clearest way possible. And to that end, there's no right and no wrong answer. So again, for those people that like I said likes to work in a world of black and white, like again, if I I show my work, the answer should be this. Is like no, there's no right or wrong answer. So again, it's not like if I say this, will I get admitted? No, and honestly, it won't be. I write the one essay and I get a chance to get in. And remember, this is all about holistic review. So again, how does your essay connect to your grades? How does it connect to your extracurricular activities? How does it connect to the letters of recommendation that your teachers are going to write for you? So again, there's no right or wrong answer. It's just about telling a story that you are excited to tell. And to that end, a question that students tend to ask admissions officers is, what are you looking for in the essay, right? It's not about what you think an admission officer wants to hear, what they're looking for. It's again goes back to you. It's about what do you feel is most important for them to know about you in that way. Because again, you would hate for them to tell you, like, we want to see this, and you write this, and you still don't get in. It feels like a waste of time. And if that's going to be the case, if you can't guarantee that you're going to get in that way, then you might as well, like I said, tell the story the way you want to tell it. Like it's almost like the one thing, if I'm gonna go out, I'm gonna go out swinging. Go out swinging by making sure you are putting forth your best foot forward in terms of this is who I am and this is what I have to bring. Take it or leave it. If you don't like it, great. I left everything out on the table in that way, and I know that at the end of the day that I'm proud of what I did and who I am and what I've been through, and what I shared in my application in that way. So again, you drive the show in this. You are the one that tells them what is important for them to know. Because again, you're the star of the show. So now, if you are at a place where you're still trying to figure out what should I write about, like I don't know, should I talk about this or should I talk about that? Again, you're telling the story that you want to tell and the story that you can tell the best, right? And so again, something that requires you to kind of like sit down and reflect upon what are the different parts of your experience that you've been through. And at the end of the day, you'll want to make sure that some part of what you're talking about connects to what you've done in high school, right? Because again, like especially what you've been through recently and who you are at this point of when I'm applying will need to be addressed at some point in your essay. But whatever prompt or whatever like idea, accomplishment, story, lesson, part of your identity allows you to tell your story the best, that's the one you want to write about in that way. And again, while there is no right or wrong answer, you do need to be cautious because there are some cliches and some overused essay topics that exist, as well as some awareness or some consciousness about the appropriateness of some of the things you might choose to write about. And I'll walk through those super quickly. So again, talking about somebody that is already clear in other parts of the application. So again, you don't want to kind of like use this as an opportunity of I feel like the one thing that I have going for me, for example, is that I'm the class president. And you got the class president in it's the first thing on your activities list, your letters of recommendation. That's what they're going to highlight as well. That again, you get into any supplements. I also make sure to talk about that as well. It's kind of like you have so many different boxes and so many different avenues to share information in your these different applications that you'll be writing and you'll be submitting. So again, it's really about this idea of just making sure that like every chance that you have to add something to the application, you're building your profile, you're building your application as opposed to kind of presenting as a one-trick pony, if that makes sense. Mental health. So this is one that is tricky, right? Because again, there is a big awareness of again the growth or awareness of the importance of having control over your mental health in that way. Colleges are investing a lot of resources into their student kind of like services, student support, and student counseling in order to make sure that any of these mental health issues that either students might be bringing to college or could pop up during college because of stress, because of anxieties, because of things like that, again they as colleges are equipped to handle that. But what also can happen on the flip side of that coin is that if you kind of like go overboard in your application about mental health and it presents as kind of like this is something that you don't have a plan for, you don't have in check or things like that, schools then have to answer the question, are we actually equipped to handle this student? Are they at a space, or are they in a space where it's like we don't even have the resources ready to support them in that way? So again, if it's an important part of your story, it's completely fine to talk about, especially if you feel it's really important, but you're not using it as a thing to harp on or to get pity or to like, you don't want to make them worry about you at the end of the day. You just want them to know that that's part of the journey that you've been through, and it is something that you're prepared to kind of like deal with or work together with the college with. So you want to be cautious of how you talk about mental health in your application. Another thing to be careful about is simple solutions to big problems, right? So this idea of like, again, and so like I believe that, if we want to cure racism, then we just need to make sure that we have like this person there and we teach these classes. If it were that simple, then again, one, the hope would be that these institutions that are in our communities would have already been implementing those things. And also the idea that like, if this was something you could have solved already, do you really need college to be able to kind of like, why don't you just go solve the problem yourself in that way, right? So I think it's that idea of that, colleges want to be part of helping you solve the problem. That's why they are invested in research. They want to help kind of like be they want to spark the mind that changes the next big thing, right? But you don't want to kind of like reduce a problem because it can make it seem like, again, that reduction of issues can make it seem like you don't care. It can come off as kind of like overconfident, things like that. Understanding that it's okay for things to be complex and you have questions about certain part of that, that's fine. You don't have to be like, I cured cancer, now let me in. Like, if you want to help cure cancer, great. Use this as an opportunity to be able to go and do that. Um, and then finally, essays that are in poor taste, right? So again, being thoughtful of language that you use, right? That again, as you're telling your authentic story, you also want to make sure that you're being thoughtful of how you talk about it, right? That there's still an avenue or an aspect of professionalism, an aspect of appropriateness that you want to approach there. So again, use appropriate language in the process. You also, and I think you also want to be making sure that you're not, just sharing things like inappropriately, right? So kind of like talking about kind of like, certain relationships or things like that. And I have seen this happen in applications before. It can be a distraction from the main point of what you want to have happen in your application. Also, does it, kind of like lead to the fact that you're going to be inappropriate on campus in that way? You just want to make sure that you're being thoughtful of the ways that you present yourself in the application. You really want to be thoughtful of that and making sure that you in doing that, that you're just exhibiting some control over how you present yourself in that way. Because again, you're going to be a part of some really big and some really kind of like, in some cases, sensitive conversations in some of the classes and some of the interaction that you might have on campus. And if you present that you can't really handle that, then they'll worry that like you'll come to campus and cause ruckus, something like that. Um, and then finally, I think it's important to understand that again, as we talk about challenges, as we talk about overcoming kind of like, again, different kind of like things that we've been through and being proud of what we've overcome in that way, we are not in the business. We don't want to be in the business of kind of like um, just like trauma dumping or kind of like oppression Olympics or things like that. It's the idea that, again, yes, we've all been through challenges and things like that. You want to write about how you overcome that challenge and how you're ready to take that next step, or again, what you are ready to kind of like step into as you are about to make this transition. Because sometimes when we make transitions and going from high school to college is a big one, because for some students, you might have been at one school for a while. You might be going into a new state. It might be a much bigger school than the schools that you've attended in that way. And if you haven't, and you like dumping your trauma, you're showing you haven't really kind of like dealt with some of your stuff, then being in this new environment can be a space where it's like, there can be triggers present and things like that. So it's all about this idea of like, don't feel like you gotta lay it on thick and make them feel sorry for you to admit you. It's all about understanding like this is how I overcame it and this is how it makes me who I am today. Remembering that the point is they want to know who you are as you're about to step foot on their campuses. So now I'll breeze really quickly through supplemental applications and essays. When it comes to the Common App, I mentioned that some schools have supplemental applications and that part of the application goes to that specific school. So to that end, there's going to be additional essays and writing supplements that will vary in length. Um, these are opportunities to just share more information about you. But remember that some colleges really care about demonstrated interest. And demonstrated interest is usually a big aspect of these supplemental essays because it's going straight to that school. They want to see if you've done your research. They want to know, again, like, like, are you applying because you have actually done the work to see if this is a good fit for you? Are you only applying because you saw us in the news or you like our football team or something like that? So again, demonstrated interest is really important. And I just really believe when it comes to demonstrated interest, you should treat every school as they care about demonstrated interest. Not every school cares, but some schools care and some schools care a lot, right? So to that end, if you treat every school like they care about demonstrated interest, then you know you're not going to slip and forget or miss anything in that way. So again, this is just a plug to say, make sure you've done your research. And especially because when it comes to some of those schools, you might have to answer the specific question of why do you want to apply to this major or why do you want to go to X school? And you want to make sure that you're able to answer that question and you're not copying and pasting it from every other school. I think the best example that I can use of that is that, like, for example, if you're applying to like NYU, for example, and I see this a lot, it's like, why would, what are you most excited about in terms of going to NYU? It's because that, have an opportunity to go to New York and be in the city and things like that. Again, might be fair, might be true, but like NYU is not the only college in New York City. There's also Columbia, there's Fordham, there's, State University of New York and City University of New York schools, right? So again, then when you say like this idea about the big city, that doesn't feel specific enough to NYU and it doesn't give them confidence that you've necessarily done the research in that way. So you just want to be really cautious of, again, how you're approaching those supplemental applications. So now, the UC personal insight questions, because in some ways it works almost as like a hybrid of a supplemental application and also kind of like this personal essay in terms of learning information about you. It's important to know what personal insight questions. These are fundamentally different essays than the Common App personal statement. Whereas the Common App personal statement, you have one essay up to 650 words. The UC personal insight questions, you're replying to 4 of 8 prompts, and each one of them is going to be 250 to 350 words max, right? So again, it's not like one big narrative. It's again, you're hitting kind of like 4 separate questions in a very short and a much more concise way. And again, you want to think of PIQs as a written version of an interview. So let's say if you were applying for a job, for those of you that might have had a summer job or something like that before, um, if you were to go and sit down and they ask you kind of like, hi, like, happy to have you here. Tell me a little bit more about the experience that you have and why you want to take this job. And you start to talk about like the golden brass doorknob. And when I turned it, it opened up this space to maybe talk about the different ways that I'm able to see the world and all that stuff. If you started talking like that to somebody in an actual interview, they're going to look at you like your head fell off, right? You don't want to approach it that way. You want to think of this as like, if you're talking and you're in an interview and they ask you like a job interview to ask you a question, you're talking about okay, this is the example, this is what I did, and this is why it's important. Answer it, get to the point. In that way. In this case, with the personal insight questions, substance, what you're actually talking about matters way more than style here. Whereas you have a lot of space for style on the personal essay on the common application. Again, you want to be prepared to write about 4 different experiences or activities, A common mistake that people make in the personal insight questions is that they use two or more prompts to talk about the same activity or experience. So you want to be able to make sure like I have different things to talk about. If I'm going to talk about student government here, I'm going to talk about sports here. I'm going to talk about my home life here. I'm going to talk about the major I want to study here, right? So you want to make sure that you have different things ready to talk about. And usually I counsel students if they're applying to schools on the Common App and schools on the UC, that I usually tell them like Common App essay first. Then I would actually say go work, write your personal insight questions second, because then you're already talking about four different things. And those are some ideas that you then might be able to utilize for any schools back in the Common Application that have a supplemental application. So again, that idea of just being ready to talk about different parts of yourself because you're not a one-trick pony. You need to be ready and prepared to do that. And then here, you can hear about it directly from the UC. They have a website and where they have a video where they literally tell you what to do and what they look for in each question on the personal insight questions. So it's just a resource to go and utilize because it is there and available. So when you get this, you'll be able to click that link. It'll take you straight to the website. You can also Google UC personal insight questions and it'll usually take you to that website as well. So now, if you're getting ready to write, really quickly, make sure you brainstorm an outline. Don't just kind of like sit and go, because again, you just want to make sure you're prepared. You have a plan for this. And in that draft, read, review, draft, read, review, draft, you're not going to get it on the first try. If you write it one time and think you've got it and you're done, you probably haven't, put enough work, you haven't done enough reflection, things like that. So this is an iterative process, especially if you're working with your counselor, your wonderful counselors. If you have other people in your circle, like your parents, a favorite teacher, other people that are like helping review, just know that that feedback loop is going to happen in that way. So just be prepared to do that. And there's some questions you want to ask yourself. Did you focus on the topic? Have you answered the essay prompt? Are you writing in your own voice? And are you telling the story that you want to tell? Are you doing this for you or are you doing this for the reader? Again, you want to make sure that those questions are, have you focused on the topic? Yes. Have I answered the essay prompt? Yes. Am I writing in my own voice? I'm telling my story? Yes. Am I telling the story that I want to tell? Yes. If it's no to any of those, that's why you have draft, read, review, so you can kind of like make sure you're getting to that place where you're answering the questions and doing the things you need to do in this process. And then reflect it on why is this important to me? Because again, you need to make sure this is important to you, not just to the college. So some quick essay do's and don'ts. You do want to make sure that you are preparing for multiple drafts, you're answering the prompts, showing more that you can tell, which what that really boils down to. You're not just kind of like going A to B to C to D and that's it. You need to kind of like paint the picture. In some spaces, you're going to need a little bit more vivid. You need to also kind of put in some of your analysis and insight in there in that way. Don't just tell the linear story in that way. You want to make sure that like you are popping off the page in terms of the essays that you are writing. Be careful of your style in the sense of you don't want style over substance. You want a mix of both for the Common App one, and you have some space to use poetic license, but you don't want to use style as a crutch because again, if you overly stylistic, the point that you're or what you're trying to say could be missed. Be ready to adapt your essay. So again, you have some places where you can use the same idea, the same kind of like topic in different places, but you need to be able to adapt it to make sure you're answering the different prompts that you're using it for. Make sure you're following the directions in the prompt and proofread your essays because again, you want to make sure that you are, again, this is not a writing test per se, but someone that doesn't spell check, someone that has run-on sentences like it's not flowing in the right way. You might have think that you put everything there, but again, those can turn into distractions as well if you have a bunch of run-on sentences and they're not really making grammatical sense and stuff like that. So just make sure you proofread. What you don't need to talk about is your GPA or tests because again, those numbers stand for and speak for themselves. The only caveat to that is there is a space in both the Common App and the UC applications for like explain more additional info, give us more context type of thing to where if there was really something crazy that happened that affected your GPA or something like that, you have space to provide some context and let them know more. Don't be afraid to write about your identity or experience. And so again, I know particularly in this moment, when we talk about in this space of kind of like removing DEI from the picture and things like that. Again, while they can remove the question that says, they can remove the question that says, your race or your ethnicity or anything like that. They can't take out your last name. They can't take out what you actually write about. So it's not like if you were a part of your if you have like a Hispanic or Latino kind of like student union or something like that, and that is an activity that you did. If you put that in your activities or if you write about them in your essay, it's not like, oh, because you said it, they got to throw out the essay. You get to talk about your lived experience, and they have said as much in that way. So don't be afraid to talk about that. If it's part of your lived experience, you are free to talk about it, and you are not in trouble for that. What the government is really trying to say is they don't want colleges to make the decision and say they admitted you solely because of that one thing. So it's really more about them, not about you in that case. So feel free to talk about that if that is a really important part of your story. I already mentioned style and substance, about being too opinionated and kind of like going off in that way. Because again, they're also be thoughtful about this whole kind of like polarization that is happening in the world in that way. Colleges want to try to do something about that. And if you're kind of coming about like you're just fitting that same narrative, they may not be as jazzed to kind of like let you in if you're not really kind of seem like part of the solution to that problem. And then also don't feel like you've got to write it the right way and feel like every word that you talked about, like you have to get the right word. So I'm like using it as a source of how I say this the right way or something like that. You don't have to do that. Authentic, natural. Your story will jump out in that way. So don't feel like you have to use big words to impress the admissions reader. So finally, with some words of the wise, you want to make sure that your essay is about something that you care strongly enough about that you want to elaborate it more for the reader. So again, that's just falling back in that space, like, is this important to you? Because if it's not important to you, then chances are it's not going to be super important to the reader. This is not about checking the box. So again, just understanding that I know this is one part of what you have to do with your applications, but this is more than anything an opportunity for you to really reflect on your own experience and prepare yourself about what is next for you in life, right? There is a lesson to be learned for you just personally from this. So just make sure that you are using that opportunity to do reflection, using that opportunity to ask questions of people, using this opportunity to get feedback from people, because what you talk about in your essay, they might have a viewpoint like, hey, did you think about this? And you might not have thought about that. So again, all of this is to get you ready for what you're about, this big jump that you guys are about to make when you go off to college in that way. So treat it as an opportunity to be able to do that. I think it's really helpful to you personally in that way, and not just for the sake of getting admitted to a college. Don't get caught up in the past. Bridge that gap from where you were to where you are right now. And remember that you're not in competition, right? That again, I know that schools are selective and things like that, but just know that when it comes to the essay, it's never a case where we sit down and like, okay, I'm looking at essay A and then I have essay B. Whose is better? I like B better. A is tossed out the pile. They're not doing that. Every application and every essay is read in its own space, in its own time, and is given its own merit in that way. So it's never a one-to-one. So if it ends up being that one person got into the school and the other one didn't, it's not because they necessarily did something better than you. It's just that in terms of holistic review and the puzzle that they put together, that their story jumped out more and it made sense to the readers in that way. So again, it's never a competition. So don't feel like you got to fight this or like you can support each other in this process. And again, focus on you. You really have a chance to do that. Other ones, getting your college list together actually goes a long way in helping you understand what your workload and what your timeline looks like when it comes to writing essays. Again, if you're going to be applying to 35 schools and 20 of them is early admission or early decision, or early action, early decision, that means your October is going to suck. Because again, you have a lot of essays and a lot of work to do. And if you didn't give yourself time over the summer to be able to do that, it makes the fall much more stressful in that way. So again, just making sure that you are really looking at your list and like this list is reflective of schools that I would be happy to go to, and not just because it's a name and I'm throwing my hat in the ring or anything like that. It'll help you understand what your workload is going to look like. And if it looks a little bit daunting, maybe consider cutting a couple schools off of your list in that way. But just making sure you're asking the question of why am I applying to this school? Google Drive is your friend. It's easy to share. People can leave comments, things like that. So just making sure that you're utilizing Google Drive. And I think one tip that I tend to share is that like if you are like doing multiple drafts of an essay, either kind of like keep an individual school in one document. So that don't kind of like put all of your schools and everything that you're writing in one document that's like 20, 30 pages. Just be thoughtful about how you're organizing your Google Drive to make sure you know the different things that you're working on, where are they at. Identify your inner circle, people that you trust with your essay. Your counselor, your college counselor should absolutely be a part of your circle, but also don't let the circle get too big. If it's too many cooks in the kitchen, that is another opportunity for you to be overwhelmed in the process because you're getting different responses from different people in that way. So you can take that step, and this is about you. You're the star. Determine who's going to be in that inner circle so that way that's like your trusted people you go to research essays, to bounce ideas off of, to give you that feedback, or if it's just like that pep talk that you need to get to the finish line for some of your essays. And again, coming back to authenticity is key. I'm just going to underline that and not have to explain it anymore. I'll stop there. I think we got at least 10 minutes left for questions. So I'm going to open the doors back up to you all to see what questions you have. And I'll stop sharing my screen from here. So we're all back in the same room. So what questions do you have for me?
You can come off of mute or you can put them in the chat and I'll read them for you. But, this is time to state who you are and get some info, guys.
How would students balance creativity and authenticity without seeming overbearing?
Good question. So what I would say is this, is that particularly when it comes to the Common App, that personal essay, you have the space to be able to do that. And I've seen all kind of like, super cool things. So I've seen two essays that I think I always remember that stand out to me. Is one, I remember this story of a student who, in the way that they were writing their essay, they kind of like they were interjecting kind of like these countdowns. So they were like 10, 9, and they would have like a paragraph or two, then like 7, 8, 6, a couple of other paragraphs, 5, 4, and kind of getting down to the end. And when they got to the end, what they ended up explaining is that this is like the scale that is used that I use like with my doctors or with my therapist or something like that. I'm trying to remember which one it was. In terms of the scale that I use to kind of like, talk about like pain or discomfort or things like that because they were autistic. And so to that end, they were also explaining how like at the beginning of this process, the beginning of high school, they were really uncomfortable. They didn't know themselves and all that stuff. But by the time they got to the end, they were at a 1. They understood who they were. They had utilized these sources, like these different resources and things like that. And that's always been one that like stood like has always like stood out to me as one of like it'll always stick in my mind for me in that way. I think that I've also seen some utilize it kind of like doing little like what are they, not monologues, but kind of these little kind of like snippets of like just like different pictures. I'm painting the picture of this experience and kind of getting back to the story, or writing it like a script that you would read for a play or something like that. Like again, you have fun with it. You can play with it. It's just the idea of like don't get caught in like I just want to do this unique thing because that catches the eye, because it can be super unique and be full of nothing. Like there's no substance underneath it in that way. So I think that idea is that again, if there's an avenue which you think there's a cool way to be able to tell the authentic story that you want to tell, try it out, see if it works, and utilize your inner circle to kind of like see like this is what I'm trying to do. Is it landing? Do you see that happening? And if they're like, nah, I'm not really seeing it, then it's okay to like, I tried it, it didn't work. Let's scrap it and try to try something else. But it's just as long as you're not leaning on the crutch like that the creativity is the only way that I can get their attention. That's not the case. But again, the best thing that you can do is marry some of that creativity with the story that you're trying to tell. And at the end of the day, what they remember is not just the essay, but the meaning underneath it and what they learned about you. Does that answer the question?
Yes, thank you.
Another question, sorry, I have a chat going, is can you give a quick example of showing and not telling? Kind of did already, but if you could.
Yeah, so it's kind of like, if I'm saying, what would be a good example of this? If you were telling the story of kind of like you're trying to kind of like explain like your journey through student government from like sophomore year to senior year. You might, telling is like sophomore year, I was a class rep. And as a class rep, I was able to be able to go and represent my class and tell a little bit about like how, we can get, lesson homework or like these type of plays and things like that. So then I continued on to become a student body secretary or vice president in junior year. And as vice president, I was supporting the president. I got a chance to meet with the faculty. And then in senior year as president, I was now able. So you see, how I'm laying it out in a chronological and a very like the facts are there, right? But if boring, more or less, right? But if you talk about like in junior year, when I was a class rep, again, I really had this opportunity. And I thought that like, to this end that, we would sit in these meetings and being able to give a presentation in front of 400 people, it was really daunting at first, but like now, like it gave me the confidence to be able to do that. So now when I got to junior year and as the, student body vice president, I really started to learn how to write these 10-page proposals that, again, so you see, I'm adding some details, like whether it's numbers, whether it's colors, whether it's like my own insight, my own kind of like thoughts and feelings about how I was reacting to the different things that happened. That's the showing part. Show them how you move through the process. Don't just get me A to B to C. If it's going to be A to B, then make A red, make B blue, put C in a circle. You know what I'm saying? Like put some color or some stuff around it so that like the reader is going along the journey and they're not just like A to B to C in that way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that was good.
Yeah.
When you were doing admissions and you were reading an essay or reading an application in general, what were some common indicators that this student would be a good fit for your school? Like what indicated that as you were reading?
So I think that that would happen a couple of ways.
Not a fit either
Yeah.
way.
Yeah. So like if what would say that they were not a fit. So again, um, McAllister, for example, being a smaller school, kind of like having some interest, like demonstrated interest wasn't like a big thing, but they made note of it, right? Or they had systems in place to understand like were they reading emails or did they come to this visit or something like that. Like for them to like kind of like know like if I'm applying to a place like McAllister, like, do you kind of like understand that we're a small community, right? Because if you write something in your essay being I'm just really excited for this opportunity to be able to like go and kind of like have this big like rah-rah school experience in terms of like supporting like, again, McAllister has a football team, but that's not their thing. It's not like you go into a Cal game or like a University of Alabama game or something like that, right? So it's kind of the idea of like if they read that application and they're just going like I don't know like why they want to come here, like they can go other places and do that. I think that's one aspect of it. At Stanford it was a little bit different, right? Because again they are so selective that they could pick a full class of whatever they wanted if they wanted to. If they wanted a whole class of 4.0, if they wanted a whole class of everybody from Nebraska, if they wanted a whole class of people that was left-handed, if that's what they wanted to do that year, they could do that. So I think for them, it was more about like this sense of understanding they can pick whatever they wanted, things that matter to them. And sometimes you can partially tell based on what essays are asking you to answer, this idea about intellectual vitality. Intellectual vitality for them didn't mean that you had a 4.0 or you were the smartest student in the class, but it really meant that like there was something that like there's a topic that I care so much about that I get lost in time with it. Like if you started talking about Labubus, like I can give you the lore, I can tell you the backstory, like like the country where the person was from, the ways that like how they like all those things, right? So it's just really about like for them, this idea of like, what do you bring to the life of our college and our university? And part of what helps you do that, understand what each school is looking for, is the research. It's the looking at their website, looking at YouTube videos and seeing how people talk about it. If they come to your school for a school visit, doing that, visiting the school if you have a chance to be able to do that. So that way it is a marriage between this is what the school values and what they look for, or like what they do with their stuff And I'm into that. Like, this is the type of student that I am. That matches what I did in high school in terms of like, they really care about research. I did research. You know what I mean? Like, so you start to see some of those matches and things like that from there. So again, that will still, be one part of it because they, at the end of the day, they also do want to make sure you can handle the work and that you'll graduate at some point. But it's just about like the connections between like how are you showing them that you've like done the research and laying out for them in your essays like why I connect to the school and all that stuff, and the other way around. Does that answer the question?
That was good.
All
We
right.
are running out of time, and I see a lot of questions, but there's one that's popular because people are liking it to say answer it. So, guys, I will send these to Mr. Davis and see if he can respond to them, and I'll share it via chat. But the one question I want to ask that I've even been getting a lot of questions are: if you're cutting down an essay, do you have any tips, especially regarding going from a flourished Common App essay to a more interview like PIQ?
Um, Well, I think for starters, what I would say is I'm always a fan of if you're really getting started, I'd rather you write more, like write until you get it all out and then work on molding it and cutting it. It's easier to do that to get to the story you want to do versus not really writing enough and trying to add stuff on it in that way. You know what I mean? So I think to that end, I think it's really about as you put it all out there and when you kind of get to the cutting table and you're ready to cut things, it's really about determining what parts of that is most important for you to be able to tell. Because again, there are going to be some places where you can absolutely like this is a piece that you could actually leave out and say for another day. This is a piece, and especially when you're going from the Common App to the PIQs, that again, that what you wrote in the Common App might end up only being one response on the PIQ, right? So to that end, it's kind of like, okay, what is most important about like, okay, we know the topic in which you're talking about. So you're talking about this is about football. So we know we're talking about football. So again, what is it about football you want to make sure you talk about that specifically answers the question for the UC, the PIQ that you're planning on using it for. So again, there's that matching of like, I'm talking about this, but what about this? I want to make sure I'm using to answer the question that is being asked in that way. So I think from a Common App, the PIQ place, that would be a way that I would think about it. But then also again, because again, you'll have enough space in your Common App essay to talk about different things. So just note that again, like I said, you might have a couple of PIQ prompts to pull from a Common App, and that you can probably break that up into two if you're trying to like make connections between different activities and stuff like that. Do you think that answered the question?
Yes.
Yeah.
That was really good. Is it okay if that I send you, she said, thank you. If I can send you the additional questions, for answers, or do you want to answer them? I know some kids are hopping off because they have other things to do, like homework. But, there was a couple questions that I can forward to you and then get them back from you if possible.
Sure,
Mostly
I can look at
about the
that.
activities and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's not a problem. I mean, I know people are on mute. If any of those was like super like pressing you and to jump off mute and ask it or something like that, I'm here, like I said, for a few more minutes. I can do that, but otherwise, I can absolutely follow up and answer those in an email or in a Google Doc or something like that.
Yeah, Aaron had asked about being neurodiverse. You already touched on it, so I want to I'll follow up with him separately once I ask you a few questions about it because I know it's something that he wants to write about. And then some other ones are just like stylistic imagery. Can I use it? Do you think I shouldn't on PIQs? But I think for those, is she still on? I can't see if she's no. Is she? No, I don't think she is. Okay, so some people ask and they're gone. So I will then take that. Oh, wait, she is on. She wants to know. The question is if you can answer it really quick is there room for this like poetic stylistic imagery stuff going on for PIQ, or should she be more direct? Like straight to the point.
The PIQs, you definitely want to be direct. You want to be to the point. Again, 250 to 350 words is not a whole lot. It's like maybe a paragraph, maybe two paragraphs. So to the end, you kind of want to get to it in that way. You really want to be direct and answer the question. And like I said, if you were to check out that UC Personal Insight question website and the video that they have on there, I think they almost say that verbatim is like get to the point, like answer the question in that way. So.
Okay, perfect. I will send you the other two because though they're on here, they're more personal, and the other one's about Riley. Yours was really good, but I want to get that in writing so I can send it to everyone. So I appreciate that question, Riley. I'll get it to him. But I want to say thank you so much for your time. You're a father, you are an educator, you're doing a lot, and we really appreciate you taking your time out to help SJND.
Yeah, no problem at all. And like I said, you'll get a copy of the presentation. It has my email address on it. If you have like additional questions and you want to reach out to me directly, completely not an issue. Just reach out and let me know.
Okay, that sounds lovely. Thank you so much, and I hope you have a great night.
Thank you so
Ms.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Davis.